All right, we're back here for part 2 of this conversation with Lydia Machova. I really want to get that pronunciation right. How is it?
No, it's getting better with every part now. So
getting better, fantastic. All right, so if you haven't watched part 1, it would make sense for you to go back and watch that one first. In part 1, what we talked about is the fundamental concept that a student has to take responsibility for learning a language themselves. And we talked about how often in language schools, the big thing that happens is that students, they turn up expecting to be taught that transfer of knowledge, but that is a problem to begin with because the students have to take responsibility. So moving on to part 2 then, what is the second part of this, of your approach to learning languages?
Yeah, it's about creating time, not finding it in your busy schedule, but creating it and making it systematic, which will make the whole language learning process a lot easier. And I believe this is really the answer to people who are busy, because I think we're all busy, aren't we? I don't know anyone who would tell me like, yeah, I'm bored most of the day. Give me a language to learn, right? I mean, we're all busy. So.
We are all busy. I mean, this is certainly for me, this is one of the most common problems I ever get told about. Olly, I don't have time.
Yeah, right. And the truth is you don't have time if you don't really create it. And by creating, I mean putting something which is a priority first on your agenda and making space for it before you get to the usual tasks of your day. Like, I don't know about you, but I have like a never-ending to-do list, which just never ends. I'm never done with my work, right? I have my own business. I have a lot of ideas what can be improved. There's always something to work on. So if I wanted to like wake up and sit at my computer and start working, I would be working till late evening and I would never be done with it because I'm busy. I don't have the time. But that's why I always learn my language right now. It's Swahili in the morning, right after I wake up. And to remind myself, I actually like to put my phone, which has the alarm clock, into my Swahili book. Which means that when I wake up and I'm still in the middle of my crazy dream, which was something totally out of this world, I wake up, I have to take the phone out of the book, and that reminds me, oh, Swahili, this is my 1 hour of learning right here, right now, before I get to the usual stuff and get busy.
I remember hearing, I can't remember where I read this, but it was a book on productivity in general. And one of those that stuck with me from that is that the suggestion in the book was that you never again use the phrase to make time, because even when you articulate that to make time for something, the idea is that you have to move things around and you have to somehow find the time, which comes at the expense of something else, right? The idea is that if you're making time, it means something else you have to shift. But the reality is that everything in our day comes down to priorities of some kind, right? We ultimately have to choose what we spend our time on. And for an illustration of this, if you ever spend any time watching TV or watching YouTube, dare I say it, watching this video or listening to this podcast right now, then consciously or not, you've made a decision to do this where you could be doing something else, right? So this idea of what we tell ourselves about creating time is kind of a red herring to begin with.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like to think about it this way. When you think about like how do you prioritize your tasks or whatever things you have to do in a day? Like a good example to realize how prioritization, how do you say that? Prioritizing? Yeah, how it really works is, so if something really unexpected happens, let's say someone from your close family had a serious accident, like they got run over by a car, and then someone like a doctor calls you from a hospital, like we have your husband, daughter, grandma here in the hospital, and they're like seriously injured. You would without doubt find 2 times out of your busy schedule and spend the time in the hospital being there with the person, right? And you had a very busy agenda for that day, most probably, but everything else was put aside because this person is here and you just need to find time for them, right? So I think this is a nice example of how if something matters to you, you will have time for that because you just do it first and nothing else matters as much as that. And by that, I'm not trying to say that when you learn a language, everything else should be priority number 2, But I think someone really wants to learn a language, and this is a process which takes several months, or years. Then you really need to make sure it's one of your priorities, and and that means you will find time for that, and maybe do other things less often, such as watching TV or watching YouTube, etc.
I mean, I guess the obvious question that leads to is, well, okay, I understand that if I want to learn this language, I have to I have to make it a priority of some kind.
Yeah.
Then the obvious question is, okay, well, how much time? Are we talking an hour a day? Is it 2 hours a day? Is once a week enough? People often, without knowing what's required to learn a language, it's kind of difficult to start prioritizing. How do you think about that?
It is, and that's exactly why I think having a plan really helps you prioritize. And when we mention how much time do you need to spend a day, I always say that at least 30 minutes a day is something that helps you learn a language. I like 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day. It is better than nothing, but I think people should strive for at least 30 minutes a day. And the ideal case would be 1 hour a day. That has proven in my case to be some meaningful amount of time that really helps me move forward in the language and not just be at the same level. 1 hour a day really gets me forward. So that helps me grow my language skills a lot. And if you have a plan, and by a plan I mean deciding upfront that you will spend, let's say, these 30 minutes or 60 minutes a day with the language in a certain period of time of the day. So for example, in my case, in the morning, I don't make this decision every day because I made a plan already. I know that the first hour of the day will be spent with Swahili. And I know that on top of that, I will have 3 italki lessons with my tutor. And I plan them before that week starts. So this helps me in the way that I don't have to decide every day. Do I feel like learning today? Do I have enough time? Or maybe am I too busy because of other stuff? It's like, no, this is the first thing. And of course, there are some days when I don't do it. Like there's some special occasions. I'm not like 100% systematic with that. But having this system helps me a lot.
It does. It gets very tiring, doesn't it? If like every day you have to think to yourself, how am I going to, all right, where's my half an hour going to be today? Let's move this around.
Exactly.
Every day having to do that, it's called decision fatigue, isn't it? It's the more decisions you have to make, the tired you get in general. So like by the time you actually sit down to learn, you're kind of like, oh, I'm getting more energy.
A lot of mental power, totally. And that's why I like to have this trigger. So my trigger is waking up in the morning. That's like, I don't have to think about it. When that happens, it's like a program. If this happens, then you learn Swahili. But also if for other things, like maybe to give another example, I like to have triggers. For example, so I work from my home on my computer, and I have one of these desks that moves up and down. So I like to work standing. Yeah, they're really, really great. But the thing is, I'm always lazy to do it. So if it was up to me to decide when do I feel like standing up and working for 2 hours standing, that would never happen. I always have the perfect excuse, like, oh, well, right now I need to, I don't know, rest my back because I'm a little tired, something, there's always a reason. So I have a very regular reminder on my computer, which tells me, now stand up. It happens twice a day, every day. And when that trigger comes, I know that I have to stand up unless I have a really good excuse, like a really, really good one. And this helps me, again, decide. I don't have to decide because this trigger does the decision for me. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also like to do this first thing in the morning because it's not that I love getting up early, and often it's really the last thing I feel like. But it's just that I think I've learned over the years that unless I make it stupidly easy, unless I give myself no choice, there are just too many things that are eventually going to come in, and sooner or later you're going to fall off the log, and it just becomes harder and harder. And for me, it's exactly the same. I'm like, okay, when I wake up, I do an hour of whatever. It's just the way it is. But I guess you've also got this question of you said something earlier which I think is a really interesting sort of avenue of discussion here, which is something is better than nothing. And so often I hear people, who in language learning who are very kind of motivational. I like to encourage people. They say, oh, you can do so much. You can lie in bed at night and do 5 minutes of this app before you sleep, and it's great because you do all these little things and get time with the language. And it's true, like all things being equal, it's better to spend 5 minutes on an app than to do nothing.
But
however, there is a level at which, like, if you're really serious, and most people who are watching this, like, they are going to have ambition. Like, they're prepared to work to learn their language. They understand they can do bits and pieces here and there, but they're interested in, okay, like I have ambitions to be speaking my target language a year from now, right? So what do I really need to do? To use the medical jargon, what's the minimum effective dose, the MED? Like what do I really, if I'm serious about learning this language, what's the minimum you have to do every day? And I think is it just me, or did you mention 30 minutes earlier as like the minimum?
I mentioned, 30 minutes is the minimum if you want to be serious about your language learning. But I think with just 30 minutes a day, you cannot really make a very visible improvement. Yeah. You can keep your level of the language, right? So you will not lose it, which is good for many people still. But I really believe 1 hour, because 1 hour, in my case, it just passes so quickly. It's not a lot of time, 60 minutes, right? So, and I think it's also a very good amount of time for concentrating. So I know some people say, like, you can only concentrate for 20 or 30 minutes. Maybe you could make a little break in between. But I personally, like, I always pick activities which I enjoy. And if I don't enjoy them, I make them enjoyable in some way. So even if I have to learn a lot of vocabulary, I make little tests for myself, or little quizzes, or whatever it takes, just to make it a little bit more fun. And then the hour just passes very, very easily. So I agree with you on that. Like 5 minutes a day, better than nothing, but it won't really help you. Yeah. So I think this is a good transition period, maybe for people who don't have the language learning habit and they want to start somehow, and they think like, oh my God, an hour a day, I can never do that.
Well, that's the thing.
For 5 minutes, right?
That's the issue, isn't it? Because we're sitting here saying, and I totally agree with you that I think, if you're serious, you've really got to be doing an hour a day. I mean, how do you expect to learn a foreign language in less than an hour a day? Come on, it's not like you're learning to play a card game or something. This is a serious undertaking. So
right.
We're here saying, okay, you really to get momentum so that you stay motivated and you get results. An hour a day is a good thing to aim for. But then the difficulty with that is that people, if you're then telling people to kind of schedule in that 1 hour a day, I mean, it's significant, isn't it? It is a significant amount of time. I mean, most people don't go to the gym every day, do they?
Sure.
But I think that's why it just comes down to this idea of just making that priority and scheduling it. And again, like for me, it's like getting it done first thing in the morning it's the only way it gets done, because I know I need to do an hour, right? If I'm serious, but I'm not going to do it at 11 o'clock in the morning. I've got other stuff. People are calling me. People at Amazon are knocking on the door trying to deliver stuff. There's a dog barking out. I don't know what. Like, something's going to happen that's going to get in the way. But I think this seems to be the difficulty in this message, isn't it? You've kind of got, we have to tell people to be doing something every day, just prioritize it.
Mm-hmm.
An hour is a lot. That's really where you have to decide, are you going to take the responsibility to step up to that hour a day and find that time in your life? Because if you can, you're going to get great results.
Exactly. And also I would like to mention just that sometimes when people listen to polyglots saying, oh, it's easy for me to find 1 hour a day or something, I think they often go like, oh, it's easy for you because, it's so important for you. You're learning your 20th language, whatever, like it's easy for you, right? But I now have experience with really hundreds of people who are learning their first or second language in their life. They're not aiming to be polyglots. They have like families, everything, just life which doesn't really have anything to do with languages, and they can easily find an hour a day. Actually, like people I work with usually learn about 8-9 hours a week, and they really never thought that they could do it. So I just want to maybe encourage people who might be watching it or listening to this, and they think they're scared of this 1 hour. Like just try, maybe start with 5 minutes a day for 1 week, and then next week make it 10 minutes a day, and then 20 minutes a day, etc. And you can go to that 1 hour, and you will see that the transition is actually not that difficult.
often at this point, a common question that comes up is, well, instead of doing 1 hour in one block, can I do 15 minutes 4 times in a day?
I wouldn't recommend 4 times 15 minutes. I would say, okay, do 1 hour a day, do 2.5 hours a day. But if you go like, I don't know, it takes some time for your mind to focus, right? So if you were doing something and then you go like, okay, 15 minutes and you do that, I think you are losing a lot of valuable minutes at the beginning of that learning part, right? So I would say if you want to do like maybe listening to a podcast and you are going to walk to a bus stop or you are driving in your car and you have 15 minutes, then by all means do that. That's good to have these moments. But if we're talking about like really sitting down with something, concentrating, going through vocabulary, etc., then I would say 2 half-hour blocks would be better. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, well, as usual, I agree with you, Lydia.
Surprise, surprise.
The real magic, I think, comes when, if you can, because you mentioned those 15-minute blocks when you're driving or whatever. I think the real magic for this, and this is what I did when I learned Italian earlier on this year. Like I was aiming for 2 to 3 hours a day, which was a big target, and I completely understand that most people don't have the time in their schedule to do that, and I really had to work hard to create that time, right? But the way that I did it was I had my 1 hour in the morning, which was the first, like the foundation. And then on top of that, I add like an hour in the gym listening. And then I add like half an hour on the train going to my office, half an hour going back. And actually, by the time I go to bed at night, I've had 3 hours. And I've only had to actually sit down and focus for one of those hours.
Yeah.
The real kind of exciting opportunity comes when you've got you do that 1 hour at the beginning of the day, and then you fill the dead time and the rest of your day in with little bits here and there. That kind of explodes in terms of what you can do.
Yeah, that sounds great. And this is the recipe how to do it. But I agree with you. It's great if people can not only do the dead times of the day listening passively, but also find that at least half hour a day with very concentrated learning, preferably in the morning, right?
Last thing then, what about scheduling speaking time, like italki sessions or something like that? How can that help?
Oh, I think that helps a lot because people are very motivated by losing money, right? So if you have paid for your lessons already and you can only cancel 24 hours before, you cannot say like, oh, we have our session in 1 hour, but I'm too busy, let's cancel. I think that's not possible there, right? So I think then people will think, okay, do I want to spend, the amount for the lesson for nothing, or maybe I could do these things later and just have this 1 hour of speaking practice. So that's why I recommend booking lessons in advance. I like to do it once at the beginning of the week for the whole week. And then I always make sure that I have time for that because I put it in my calendar, of course. So everything else has to accommodate to the lessons.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about the financial side, but even from, if you're someone watching who struggles to commit, or if you can't commit to yourself, right? If you struggle to kind of create the time for yourself, I mean, because I struggle to create the time for myself often, but I'll never miss an appointment with somebody else, right? So if you struggle to commit to yourself, well, make an appointment with somebody else and see what happens then. So book that session with your italki teacher on Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And then it's not like then you choose whether you turn up or not. You're turning up and you actually have to make the decision to cancel. And that's something that is actually quite hard to do for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is also why people like to go to the gym with someone, or why they're more successful if they go with someone than if they go by themselves, right?
So how can you involve someone else so that you can avoid, so that you run the risk of letting that person down? That can be very, very powerful.
This also works not just for italki teachers, but also if you agree to have a speaking session with someone else who is learning the language.
Right.
And
yeah.
I think we'll touch on that in the next parts of this.
Indeed we will. Indeed we will. So this would be a good place to end part 2. So then in part 1, we talked about the importance of mindset and how your attitude going into learning a language determines your success. In this part, we've spoken about the importance of creating time, making language learning a priority in your life, and a few ways of doing that. And in part 3, I believe we're going to talk about actually what to do when you start learning.
That's right.
All right, Lydia, I'll see you back for part 3.
Okay, see you there.